Well, let's get some more analysis from our international affairs commentator, Doug Herbert. Doug, welcome to you.
Hi, Tom.
A pretty busy agenda for President Joe Biden. His first trip to the Middle East in 6 years, his first as president, and perhaps Iran's nuclear program topping the agenda?
Yeah, it is. But I think it's also important to sort of put this in context. Biden doesn't want to make this trip. The Mideast is nowhere near the top of his priority list, far from it. He came into power, he campaigned on the fact that China is the big 21st century strategic threat for the United States. He would like to. He thinks that the priority should be right now China, the war in Ukraine, even his poll rating slump and the looming midterm elections in the U.S. in November. These are all more important to him, but he cannot ignore. He is forced by the reality of geopolitics, big word, but the upheaval in this region, to confront, to go back to the Middle East and to show that American leadership can still salvage itself. What he's immediately trying to do is this comes at a time when Israel used to be sort of the pariah state for a lot of its neighbors. Almost all of its neighbors in the region, the Arab countries around it. And what's happened more recently is there's been talk, it hasn't all been made explicit yet, none of it's official, of greater defense cooperation. This once would have been the most taboo thought in the world between Israel and its immediate, the Persian Gulf states, including Saudi Arabia, but also throughout the region, Egypt and Bahrain and the UAE, all of these countries which never in the past would have thought of cooperating, that perhaps coming together in a defense pact, almost like a NATO light in the Mideast. It's not NATO because there's no Article 5, an attack against one's an attack against all. But coming together saying that the idea being the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And what do I mean by that? They all share a common enemy, and that is Iran. And we've heard in recent days Iran upping its uranium enrichment, Israel considering Iran, of course, an existential threat, that nuclear deal on the verge of collapse. They're trying to revive the 2015 nuclear deal, the talk of Iran selling perhaps drones to Russia. All of these countries still consider Iran to be the real and present danger. And as much as they may have animosity, to say the least, for one another historically, and geopolitical animosity, and don't trust each other. Saudi Arabia was never part of the Trump administration's so-called Abraham Accords, which were Egypt and Bahrain and Morocco and Sudan. It's held out, but still they're coming together because that, if you will, visceral, almost hatred of Iran overrides any geopolitical animus that these countries all have towards one another. Biden is there to officially, according to the White House, try to strengthen stability in what he calls a consequential region of the world.
OK, so he's got that issue to tackle. He's also going to be spending a couple of hours at least in the occupied West Bank. What are the Palestinians hoping to get out of President Biden's visit, if anything at all?
Nothing. Almost absolutely. And I'm not saying that to be glib or cynical. From the Palestinian perspective, just about everything that is happening during this visit, especially the fact he's spending much longer in Israel than in the West Bank. He's spending just a matter of hours there in a meeting with Mahmoud Abbas, the putative, the Palestinian leader, who basically has almost zero respect among Palestinians themselves, has no real power anymore. It's a real symbolic meeting here. They see this forging of closer ties, to use a cliched term, between Israel and the Arab countries in the region that I was just talking about. This all comes at the expense of the Palestinians. Now, officially, what's interesting is Saudi Arabia, I was saying, has held out in signing on to these Abraham Accords, or in really normalizing its relations with Israel. And the reason, on paper, officially it says it's done that, is until there's a settlement in the Palestinian conflict. So officially it's standing by the Palestinians. But the fact is the Palestinians realize they feel like they've been completely just thrown overboard in all of these equations. They don't think the U.S. is really concentrating on their cause anymore. They don't think anyone is really concentrating on the Palestinian cause, because they don't see any will or determination in the Israeli leadership. Even under this caretaker leader, Yair Lapid is only going to be there till elections in November. They don't see any willingness of a real change in direction in the Israeli leadership. They see themselves as basically frozen. Meanwhile, they see their territories as still colonized. There are hundreds of thousands of Israeli settlers in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem as well. From their point of view, the Palestinians, even if they were to get this elusive deal for a state of their own, it would almost be impossible to enforce, given the fact that their state would look like Swiss cheese. The reality on the ground means that they would be so disconnected, one Palestinian area from another, and interspersed with settlers and settlements, that it would be effectively pointless. So they are in a very pessimistic, grim mode right now with Biden's visit. They see it as little more than symbolic. They think nothing is going to emerge from it.
Okay, then, of course, Biden heads to Saudi Arabia. That's going to be another challenge for him there.
Oil. And that is actually the big point of the trip. Just the big reason he's going here is he needs to somehow cajole Saudi Arabia to ramp up its oil production, drive down prices, deprive Putin of some of his oil revenues that he's using to finance the war in Ukraine.
Okay, well, thanks for that. Our international affairs commentator, Doug Herbert, thank you very much indeed for your analysis.